Lauren, thanks for coming on. Appreciate you obviously giving our insight. As you know, we've got the high performance program and the elite sport program at the school, which gives students an opportunity to get S&C, nutrition advice, psychology advice, and give them the best way to their pathway in whatever they want to take in the future. Obviously, your nutrition background is something that we really want to talk about today. Can you just give us an insight into what you do currently and your background?
Yeah, absolutely. So for the last 8 years, I've been working with the English Institute of Sport and working with a range of different sports, from British Taekwondo to swimming to British badminton, and most recently for the last 5 years I've been working with the Paralympic and Olympic athletes for British cycling. Most recently, within the last few months, I've actually finished with cycling, and I'm now going to be working with Leeds Rhinos to do a PhD in performance nutrition as well. So yeah, a broad range of experience in terms of nutrition, and I suppose within that I've worked with athletes from under 16 years of age all the way up to kind of senior elite level as well.
Brilliant. In terms of obviously what got you into nutrition, what was your kind of story and background in that said to you, right, this is a kind of pathway you wanted to take from school?
Yeah, so I was one of those weirdos from when I was like 15, 16 years of age. I almost had a few really good conversations with our like guidance counselors back in secondary school in Ireland. And we kind of figured out that my big passions were around food and sport. I played basketball at an elite level for 15 years, and kind of that ideal balance between, food and sport and the combination of the two. So I did a degree in human nutrition and dietetics, so I'm a dietitian as well, and then straight away pursued my master's in performance and sport and exercise nutrition to kind of specialize in that area, and how we can support athletes to the best that we can.
Nice. So what we're going to use this as an opportunity to hopefully get some questions on some of the parents that give us questions, and students. You obviously, I sent them questions before, and you've managed to section right into different ones, mainly the key topics of appetite, snacks, supplements, and timings. So hopefully we won't get through all the questions in which we got, but what we can do is kind of group, and you can engage and go through a bit more in terms of them questions. So we'll start with appetite, and one of the key questions is a lot of our students from 11 to 18-year-old go through many different types of foods, and they not always the best of diets and so on. And one of the questions is mainly when they get home from school. There's that gap between the school time and when dinner time is as well, and that can be filled with pretty much sugary and unsavoury snacks, as we would say. What do you kind of recommend as to the adults and maybe the parents and even the students? What would you recommend is a key probably element of filling that gap without obviously knocking in them sugary and savoury snacks?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and a really common one in terms of that timing post school and by the time they get home. I think the first thing to recognize is if we compare kind of kilo per kilo, an adolescent versus a adult, all of our adolescents, our teenagers, are going to need a lot more energy in their diet because they're growing, they're developing. You throw on top of that a whole heap of training that some of these kids are doing, well, their energy needs and their appetite is going to be a lot higher than probably what us as adults and as parents experience. So I think the first thing to recognize is if your kid's coming home from school and they're absolutely starving, they probably need to eat. And I think the first thing to do, and a really important one to probably do with your kids as well, is to actually sit down when you're not hungry and actually work out throughout the day the timings of the meals and their snacks. So if it's a case of they're having lunch at maybe 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we're not letting them eat, or they don't have their next main meal until 6 o'clock in the evening, that's 5 or 6 hours there that if you throw in training on top of that and they're not eating a lot of food, us as adults would be hungry, let alone young, growing, developing kids that are training loads. So I think the first step is definitely to structure your day, get your kid involved in this, get them organized and think about when they should be eating and what they should be eating, and then have an idea of some of those quick and easy snacks that they can have when they come straight away from home from school, that it might not then later impact their their evening meal. So a key one there is either you can pack a snack with them to have on maybe their way home to get that timing a little bit earlier, so it's not too close to that meal, or they can come home and have a snack straight away, depending on the timing. So, really simple, easy ones are things like a small bowl of cereal, some yogurt, and some fruit, one slice of toast and having some beans on toast in the evening time, like some cereal bars, fruit, hummus, veg, things like that have quite a lot of nutrients. There's some bits of protein, you've got some carbohydrates in there as well, and that it's quite balanced. And I think by bringing the kids and getting the kids involved in that as well, and giving them a bit of structure, they'll know that when they're coming home to a snack. So they're less likely to then automatically go to the treats shelf or the snack cupboard or wherever it is, so that they've got that option there. I think another important thing is to recognize and remember that, again, young kids, when they're growing and when they're developing and they're training loads, it's really important that we focus on things like their calcium intake in particular, because they're still growing in terms of their bones. So including some dairy products in there like milk, yogurt, cottage cheese, things like that are really important, and kind of that mid-afternoon snack can be a really good time to give them a big glass of milk, or a big portion of yogurt or something like that.
Brilliant. Yeah, and kind of just to kind of lead on the appetite one of the questions we had from one of the parents is, obviously students, as they work through the year groups, they go through growth spurts. Is there any sort of recommendations as what they should be eating differently in them times, or is it very similar? Did they uptake more, or is it just a natural progression that you shouldn't really worry about in terms of a parent?
Yeah, I definitely don't think it's something to worry about. I think the first thing to recognize is that energy intake. So again, I remember my mum when I was a kid, there was a few years there that she was convinced I had a wooden leg or something, because I was eating everything in front of me and I was never full. And again, I was going through that growth spurt. And I think if you're kid is really hungry all the time, respond to that and be understanding that they're probably going through that growth spurt. They need to eat more. They'll probably need to eat more than us as well. I think making sure those extra foods and those extra meals that they might be eating, that they're as nutritious as they can be, so that all that extra energy isn't coming from your chocolate, your crisps, your sweets, your Monsters, your Red Bulls, things like that, that it's good quality food. And then you can make sure that you're covering all your bases, definitely. Another one to probably have a bit of a think about as well, in terms of that kind of critical time point, is kind of from the female's perspective, and making sure that they're getting enough iron in their diet. So kind of vegetarianism and vegan is really common in social media at the minute. So making sure that we're kind of still getting our kind of red meat regularly throughout the day, and boys and girls. So not just girls, but it's extra important for girls, especially kind of going through puberty and starting periods and everything. So really encouraging in that is another important one to have a think about.
Oh, class. So when we move on to kind of the snacks topic now, we look at different snacks, and you discussed a few about what you did at the time and when we get in the evening. What would you recommend are the best probably examples of healthy snacks probably through the day to both buy and use as, that are probably more effective rather than the less healthy ones that people would probably go to in the supermarkets?
Yeah, absolutely. No, great question. Snacks are probably one of the most common things that people ask about. You've got a few different options. You've got your kind of homemade options, those ones that we mentioned in terms of when you're in the house, and a little bit handier, whether it's your bowls of cereal, your beans on toast, maybe it's eggs on toast or an omelette or something like that, kind of small portion wise to make it into a snack. I think always something I'd encourage, and even to get kids involved with as well, is making homemade flapjacks, or making your own cereal bars, or egg-based muffins, or energy balls, or something like that. Again, loads of recipes out there at the minute they can get kids involved with, and then they can put their own flavors and tastings on it, and you can make a batch which will last kind of 3 or 4 days. So they're all really, really great options. options in terms of things that you're buying from supermarkets. Things like rice cakes, cereal bars are a really good option in terms of those more carbohydrate, energy-based foods, especially if they're training that day. But in terms of cereal bars, there's such a wide range out there at the minute. It's really important to go for kind of you almost get what you pay for sometimes with cereal bars, and the key thing to look at is look at that ingredients list at the back, and if you've got 20 ingredients for an oat-based cereal bar, well, then there's probably a lot of kind of foods and ingredients there we don't want. So try and go for the minimal amount of ingredients in your cereal bars. Go for your whole grains, your brown versions as much as possible, like your Nature Valley bars, your Naked bars, Nutri-Grains, things like that are all good options. Other real good portable ones where possible are things like, you know, a small carton of milk is a really great one. Yogurts are obviously another obvious one. And then, you know, as wide a range of fruit as your kid will eat, and obviously vegetables as well. All loads of really great options.
Class. So just on the snacks topic, just to finish off on that, would be, you know, a lot of students are getting in late from training, as you probably will do yourself. You know, what is probably the latest time in the evening, really, you should be eating snacks or anything at that time?
Yeah, for me, if we're kind of training late in the evening, we're getting back quite late, the first most important thing is that they're eating something. That's the really important part, because they've just trained, they've probably had quite a long period of time until or since they've last eaten, and you're then going into 6, 7, 8 hour night sleep and a fast. So getting something in there late in the evening time is really important. How big that meal is will probably be influenced by how close to bed. So if it's getting quite late in the evening times, you're probably not going to have a full main meal. But making sure that meal or the snack, or like a decent snack, is quite balanced. So some of those ones we mentioned before, a decent bowl of cereal or porridge, or something like overnight oats that they can put or make earlier on in the day or the night before, that it's already there and ready for them in the evening time. Again, eggs on toast is a great one. And yeah, that kind of portion size will vary. So I'd never really put a time restriction on it. It's more the later on the evening, probably the slightly smaller portion size. And then also to just have a little bit of a think about kind of your fluid intake as well. Some people are absolutely fine with having quite a lot of fluid before bed and they won't wake up, but just being quite mindful of making sure that they rehydrate after any kind of training session, but not at the compromise of their sleep in the evening as well, so that we don't want them waking up loads at night because they've been necking a lot of water to try and rehydrate.
Yeah, of course. So when we move on to kind of the dreaded question for some people, is a supplement question for parents. Parents have a lot of questions on supplements and the use of supplements and the effectiveness of them, and, you know, should their child be taking them and so on. So the first one we kind of look at is how much protein and meat intake is probably suitable for a 16 to 18-year-old. This is more of a sixth form question. And what part do we kind of have? Is there a need for protein shakes? Is there a viewpoint where it should be used, or do you not think they should be there?
Yeah, I think protein is kind of that go-to nutrient that when you think about athletes and you think about training and supplements, that's the first thing normally that people think about. I think the most important thing as protein as a nutrient is what we say type, timing, and total. So providing you're getting enough protein intake throughout the day, and if we look at kind of our main meals as our plate, we normally talk about if we have a third of our plate that are those fueling-based carbohydrate foods, like your rice, your pastas, your potatoes, a third of your plate that's your support-based fruit and vegetables, then a third of your plate can be the protein-based healthy fats type foods like your meat, your dairy, your chicken, your eggs, tofu, things like that. So providing all of your main meals have a good supply of protein in them, so that third of a plate, and some of your snacks have some protein in them, again, that dairy products as beans on toast we mentioned, then there's probably no need to have that extra protein in. So that's a really good, important thing. There's probably other elements in their diet, first of all, that they can make sure that they're ticking off before even considering protein. If we are not getting that in, and if we are really struggling in terms of those timings around main meals, or we're looking to get some kind of a recovery snack in, and it's really difficult to get fresh milk or to have a sandwich ready, or we're traveling, then it could be something to consider. But there's always a good alternative. So again, if we're talking about recovery, which we'll touch on in a sec, milk is probably, I mean, if we think of most protein shakes, they're made from whey and they're made from casein, which are both milk-based proteins. So why not have a pint of milk instead, which will give you not only the protein, the carbohydrates to recover. It's a liquid, so you're rehydrating, but there's also a whole range of vitamins and minerals as well that will be in addition that you won't get from a protein shake alone. So on the whole, like up until you're probably 18 years of age, I don't think there's a need for protein shakes in particular. But I understand that they're really popular, and they're kind of that first thing that most athletes kind of go to initially. But like I said, if you've got enough throughout the day, you've got a regular timing in your meals and some of your snacks, then there's no need to throw some in addition.
Yeah, on that question, is there any sort of supplements that you would say that might be a vitamins, minerals, or so on that you think might be suitable to any sort of thing, or would it be down pretty much the balanced diet route?
Yeah, I mean, look, supplements, they do exactly what they say in the tin. They should supplement your diet. And the majority of the time, if your diet is sufficient, if it's varied, if you're including all foods from all food groups, well, then there shouldn't be a need to supplement in addition. Very similar to the protein idea. If you've got enough protein in your diet, there's no need to supplement in addition. And the most common one that people kind of ask about are kind of vitamins, mineral supplements, vitamin C's, probiotics, things like that. And the only one that there's a whole heap of research behind will probably be vitamin D, and that's across the board, kids to adults, because we live in delightful England and we don't get a lot of sun here. That's the one that I would certainly recommend. Apart from that, there isn't really any other supplements, especially with kind of under 16s, under 17s, that unless they are lacking it in their diet or for a certain medical reason, that they would need to have one. And in terms of some of those supplements, like we already mentioned with protein, you can probably get it from your diet in another way. Another idea there is kind of around sports drinks. Well, we can make our very same sports drinks to a Lucozade Sport, a Powerade, a Gatorade by mixing half fruit juice, half water, a small pinch of salt, and that is the exact same as a sports drink. So there are alternatives. The other really important thing, and probably the first thing I should have said, was that any supplements you do take, it does increase your risk of a positive anti-doping test. So any athlete across the board who is registered with a national governing body or a sporting body, and they could be drugs tested at any point, especially those athletes who are potentially national or international athletes, and even though they might be kind of under 18 years of age, they still could be tested. And there's huge risks with supplements. We've got to be really, really diligent and careful with any supplements we do take. I think the 3 points we normally go through is what are the risks, what are the consequences, and what are the benefits in terms of your performance, and if you weigh up all those options, you've got to be really, really careful with anything you're taking. The other part with supplements and why they're so risky is because it's a massive grey area. So on one side you've got food, which is monitored and kept an eye on by the Food Standards Agency. You've got medications and the medical side of things, which are all regulated, and you've got to have a license to produce medications. Supplements are this grey area in the middle, which I tomorrow could create a product and sell it to yourself, Grovesy, and nobody would stop me. It's not regulated, it's not licensed. So as you can imagine, there's a lot of people cutting corners. There can be a lot of cross-contamination as well. So it's a really risky area that athletes need to be really, really careful and diligent with what products, what companies they're using, and making sure if they do consider using any products that they should all go through the Informed Sport program, which is a completely independent certification program that companies can choose to go through to pay for some of their products and to be batch tested to the standards of WADA or the World Anti-Doping Agency. So again, that's if you consider using any of those products. But again, if you've got a varied, balanced diet, there shouldn't be any need to have any supplements in addition.
Perfect. Just going on to kind of timings now in games, we have a lot of maybe individual and team sport athletes who will get sporadic times in the games where they get breaks and opportunities where their energy levels might be quite low. What do you recommend in terms of maybe a snack or something in the middle where we maybe get to half time in order to kind of raise them energy levels that might have dipped through a bit of activity or physical activity they've taken part in?
Question, and timing and quantities is always one that's kind of almost the first question we get asked. I think actually in terms of their energy levels and those snacks and fueling, it actually comes from before training or before the game and before they start. So making sure that you're getting a small snack within that hour beforehand that's really fuel-based foods. So those carbohydrate foods that are quite easy to digest and familiar to the kids as well. So again, looking at some of those simple snacks that we mentioned earlier, like cereal bars, like dried fruit, like bananas, rice cakes. Again, that's sports drink that you can make your own version, or even something as simple as like a jam sandwich. Again, really simple carbohydrates, easy to digest. All of these snacks are also really good options to have during a game, if you're training all day, or if you're competing at regular races throughout the day and you need to be grazing quite regularly. All of those options are really good too. Additional ones, which a lot of people ask about, are around kind of your jelly babies, your jelly sweets, things like that, gels. For me, providing they're not having them every day, I think it's absolutely fine to be having some kind of jelly babies or sweets or Haribo, whatever it is, during a game or during a like a heavy, well, not so much training session. It depends on the sport. But I think that is almost emphasizing, right, the use of these sweets is because you need energy for training, and you can emphasize with that, well, in an everyday life, you probably don't need them as much because you're not training, you're not competing. So it almost helps to show the role that they play in the diet. But yeah, any of those snacks are really good options, and always making sure that you're kind of drinking quite a good bit throughout training as well.
Yeah, perfect. Lauren, I can't thank you enough for what you've delivered to us today. I think there's been some really good things. Is there anything in terms of what you would say in terms of the parent feedback or pupil feedback in, great meals or great ideas you've got that you would say, these are really good ideas you can start thinking about when you think about your nutrition as a sporting athlete?
Yeah, for me, it comes back to almost that first point around structuring your day and figuring out, right, if my kid or if I personally am going to have 3 meals and 3 snacks, what are those 3 meals and 3 snacks that I should be having? If you sit down with your kids and figure that out, figure out the different options that they like, I think they're really important ones. And I think involving your kid in that process is a really, really important part. On the other side, for me, more and more nowadays we see kids going into school without having breakfast. So for me, like, that breakfast is unbelievably important, not only because you've just fasted for 6, 7, 8, 9 hours, how much sleep that they're getting, but also in terms of that recovery. If these athletes are training so much, that rest period overnight is really important in terms of their recovery. But because they have been fasting, it's really important that breakfast time is a really good quality meal as much as possible. And I know timings is normally, everyone's in a rush, they can't really have a cooked breakfast or something like that. But even if they are on the run and they're having something like a smoothie or the overnight oats that I mentioned earlier, and they're having them on the run, the fact that they're getting in some good quality food, some energy, some protein, some fruit and vegetables in there as well, where possible, will set them up for the day really good, to be able to not only to have all the energy levels and brain function that they need for school, but for training quite late in the evening time as well. And if we miss that out, that will have consequences later on in the day, and they'll probably be more likely to be craving and keen to go for your chocolate, your crisps, your sweets, your biscuits, things like that. And so yeah, structuring your day and having a good meal plan in mind, as well as really focusing on that breakfast time meal, are my 2 top tips.
Class. Lauren, it's been an absolute pleasure. I'm sure we've taken loads. I'm sorry we couldn't get through all the questions, but I think we'd have been we're on a long Zoom call right now. But I really appreciate everything you've done. And if I get any more questions on top of that, I might fire them over to you and get back as soon as I can. That'd be brilliant. But thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, no bother. Cheers, Cozy.